Tonight, mandate backlash. A court order pushes pause on the president's vaccine requirement for employers with more than 100 workers.
The resolution is adopted.
This is the massive trillion-dollar bipartisan infrastructure bill passes the House. And Ohio Republicans draw up a mirror-image bill of the Texas law banning nearly all abortions in the state. Plus, peace that passes all understanding.
We see ourselves as apprentices to the Most High.
A father-son duo's dissertation on peace at the Museum of the Bible. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
The ban is over and international travel is back. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
Good evening, I'm Jenna Bratter. U.S. international travel restrictions have lifted for the first time in more than a year and a half.
That's right. The change comes as more than 24 states sue the Biden administration over its sweeping COVID mandates on businesses that employ more than 100 workers. CBN's Brody Carter joins us with more on the fast-moving case and the fight against COVID-19. Brody.
John, Jenna, just 24 hours after Biden's vaccine mandate was given a deadline of January 4th, a federal appeals court halted the vaccine and testing requirements, citing grave statutory and constitutional issues as reasons for the injunction.
This is about keeping people safe in the workplace, and it's critical and it's important to do, and so that's the message that we want to send out.
The White House is not backing down, vowing to defend the vaccine mandate after at least 27 states sued to block OSHA's federal vaccine mandate. For now, some 84 million workers nationwide may not have to comply by January 4th.
As the chief legal officer of Louisiana, I'm taking action to prevent the government from making your health care choices.
The multi-state lawsuit led by Louisiana's AG, Jeff Landry, was granted by the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals Saturday. Now it's up for judicial review. A major concern among those who won't comply is their belief in religious exemptions.
This is a direct attack on states' rights. This is a direct attack on individual liberties and freedom. And it's a complete overreach of the federal government.
From states to private universities, Dr. Albert Mohler, president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, joined the fight, suing the Biden administration, challenging the private employer vaccine mandate. Meanwhile, federal employees must be fully vaccinated by day's end Monday. While most report they are complying, thousands are seeking exemptions on religious grounds. And U.S. travel restrictions are no more. Foreign nationals are free to travel to the U.S. from Mexico, Canada, and most European countries if they can prove they're fully vaccinated. This as COVID cases, deaths, and hospitalizations continue to drop.
Those who are eligible to travel but not yet vaccinated will need to provide proof of a negative COVID-19 test within 1 day before their flight's departure.
There have been a number of lawsuits filed against the Biden administration regarding these vaccine mandates all across the country. Today, the federal government requested those cases be consolidated in one circuit court by November 16th. Those circuits, they're moving very quickly. Attorneys I spoke with at Alliance Defending Freedom say they wouldn't be surprised if this ends up in the U.S. Supreme Court. John, Jenna, back to you.
It certainly looks like that's where it's headed. Thank you so much, Brody Carter. Tonight, just shy of 3 months after it passed in the Senate, the trillion-dollar bipartisan infrastructure bill becomes law, with over $100 billion for roads and bridges and tens of billions to boost internet access and upgrade water and sewer systems.
And it's only part one of the president's agenda. Part two is an even bigger bill that focuses on what the White House calls human infrastructure. Dale Hurd explains.
Democrats are saying that if they'd only passed the infrastructure bill sooner, they would have won the Virginia governor's race. Republicans are saying the Democrats still don't get it.
The resolution is adopted.
After months of Democratic infighting, the $1.2 trillion so-called roads and bridges bill is headed to Joe Biden's desk for his signature, the first part of his so-called Build Back Better agenda.
We took a monumental step forward as a nation. We're just getting started.
The legislation is billed as the single largest investment in the nation's roads, bridges, rail lines, and airports in decades. It includes $110 billion for roads and bridges, $66 billion for Amtrak, $65 billion to improve internet access, and $55 billion to upgrade water and sewer systems. But it also includes $500 million for tree equity, making sure streets have the right balance of trees, billions for climate change, and even gives money to China for research. Democratic leaders Sunday insisted that if the bill had been passed before last Tuesday's Virginia gubernatorial election, Terry McAuliffe would have won.
Well, look, I do think the voters sent a message on Tuesday. They wanted to see more action in Washington.
We should have passed these bills in early October. If we had, it would have helped Terry McAuliffe probably win the governor's race.
Republicans say the Democrats did not get the message voters were sending last Tuesday, that Americans struggling to make ends meet under the pandemic and rising inflation are in no mood for big spending in Washington.
You would think this would be a wake-up call for the Democrats. It was a rejection election. Voters overwhelmingly across the country rejected these radical policies of the Democrats, which have caused inflation, rising prices.
And Republicans see a giant red wave sweeping the country next year.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the rest of the clown car in Washington, is setting the stage for a victory in 2022, a bigger victory in 2024.
Some House Democrats do see the writing on the wall from last Tuesday's elections, with increasing numbers announcing they're retiring. Polls not only show Joe Biden's approval rating at 38%, but nearly 2/3 of Americans and almost 1/3 of Democrats don't want him to run again. And the second part of Biden's infrastructure package could make voters even angrier. A multi-trillion-dollar social spending bill Republicans say is nothing more than socialism. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Dale. Here with us now for our Faith Nation political panel, Nathan Gonzalez, editor-in-chief of Inside Elections, and David Brody, CBN News chief political analyst. Welcome to both of you. So the president joked on Saturday that Infrastructure Week is finally over. What's not a joking matter is his latest poll numbers. David, a new USA Today Suffolk poll shows his approval rating at only 38%. Is the president's win on infrastructure enough to stop the bleeding?
Yeah, Jenna, I don't think so. 38% is a paltry number. It's his lowest ever. And look, this is what the Democrats are hoping for, that this infrastructure bill will indeed be some sort of reprieve for the president. But look, if you look at the actual polling on the infrastructure bill itself, a lot of Americans don't necessarily think it's going to be this big of a deal and it's going to really help their lives. So, this idea that the Democrats all think that this is going to be the saving grace for Joe Biden, I don't see it at all. I think that's not what the polling bears out at all.
Nathan, the White House is eyeing a House vote, on the second part of the president's agenda, one that includes government intervention from cradle to grave. In an interview with the New York Times, Democratic Congresswoman from Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, said no one elected the president to be FDR. They elected him to be normal and to stop the chaos. Nathan, how much of a point does she have, and are Democrats overshooting with these spending bills?
Well, I think Congresswoman Spanberger represents part of the divide within the Democratic Party right now. Spanberger represents a very competitive congressional district in Virginia. She's got to be one of the most vulnerable members of Congress in terms of re-election in the country. And she's at odds with some of her progressive colleagues who are saying this is the time to go big. And I think one of the challenges is that Democrats probably learned the wrong lesson from 2020. I think 2020 was in large part a repudiation of President Trump rather than a grand victory or a legislative mandate for the Democratic policies. And I think what we saw in Virginia and New Jersey last week, even though it's just 2 out of 50 states, was that there are voters that are concerned with the direction of the country, they're concerned with the economy, and they don't trust the current Democratic leadership, whether it's the White House, governors, state legislatures. They don't trust current Democratic leadership that they're leading in the right direction.
Yeah. Let's talk about the administration's latest COVID-19 mandate for companies that Brody Carter was reporting on. The White House says it will fight to overturn the federal appeals court ruling. David, this to you. Did they have solid legal ground to stand on here?
Well, I think the Biden administration is in quite a bit of trouble here. I mean, look, it starts with the 10th Amendment, right? This idea that the states have control over pretty much most of what the founders intended. There are certain things, obviously, that the founders did not intend, but this is not one of them. So the 10th Amendment's a problem for this administration from a constitutional standpoint. And then let's wait a minute for a second. So the OSHA rules here, right? The whole idea that that this was an emergency action, that OSHA had to take this emergency action on the federal mandate because, you know, it's a virus that's killing people. And then all of a sudden we find out that the OSHA rules won't go into effect for a couple of months. If it's an emergency, why are we waiting a couple of months until January? So, you know, they've got some problems legally in court, I think, when it comes to the Biden administration.
We should note last week's governor's race in Virginia was seen as a referendum on President Biden and Democrats. Nathan, we are exactly 1 year away from the next midterm elections, November 8th, 2022. Your thoughts on where things are headed and what things look like, how they're shaping up?
Yeah, I think when you match history with the current political environment, the stage is set for Republicans to have a good or great election cycle. I mean, we still have to have these races play out, but Tuesday's results just confirmed that Democrats are vulnerable, that the majorities are vulnerable. What I think is interesting on the vaccine, looking at the exit polls in Virginia specifically, that a majority of Virginia voters, 54 to 43%, actually supported an employer mandate of a vaccine, and those voters supported Terry McAuliffe. But COVID-19 as an issue was a distant third, tied for third in terms of the issue that voters are prioritizing: jobs in the economy and education. And so what will be interesting is a year from now, you know, what will the COVID conversation be like? I hope personally, and hopefully from a nonpartisan perspective, that we're not talking about COVID in the same way, that it's more of a hassle than anything else. But, you know, what else is going to crop up? And it'll probably be jobs in the economy, and education will continue to dominate the conversation.
David, I know you had a thought on that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. This reminds me of 2010. You know, Obama took over in 2008, then the Tea Party came along 2 years later, and Obama got shellacked, and the party got shellacked. They lost 63, net gain for Republicans, 63 House seats. They also won 7 Senate seats as well in 2010. That's exactly what this feels like. And if you go deeper into the numbers, when we looked at that poll of 38% for Biden, 7 out of 8 independents believe that Joe Biden's presidency is worse than they thought. 7 out of 8 independents. That is staggering for this president. It's really bad. The only thing better is probably Nathan's couch. That's very impressive behind you, Nathan. By the way, it feels like I'm looking into heaven in a way, Nathan.
Speaking of more numbers. More numbers, the issue of the southern border. President Biden says that parents who were separated from their children deserve some kind of compensation. Nathan, new polling shows this idea is widely unpopular with the American people. Rasmussen, 57% say Americans should not pay illegal immigrants a cent. Trafalgar, 56%. Nathan, are Democrats playing with fire here?
I'm surprised the numbers aren't worse on that policy. I mean, if the conversation a year from now is should the U.S. government give or not give immigrants who are in this country illegally money or not, then Republicans are going to have a cakewalk. I mean, they're just going to win up and down the ballot. We'll see how this plays out in the courts from a policy perspective. We'll see how it plays. You know, I'm not convinced that that will be the defining issue. But if it is, you know, Democrats are going to get hammered.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there. Great to have both of you, David Brody and Nathan Gonzalez. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, while the Supreme Court has yet to rule in a challenge to a Texas measure banning abortions, another state is looking to pass a similar bill soon.
Welcome back. Republican lawmakers in Ohio are crafting a Texas-like abortion bill and taking it even one step further. The Texas law bans abortion after a heartbeat is detected in the womb, usually around 6 weeks. The Ohio bill would ban all abortion. The one exception would be if the mother's life was at risk. The Ohio proposal follows the same mechanism used in the Texas law, encouraging citizens to sue anyone who aids in an abortion.
And here with us now is Mary Parker, Director of Legislative Affairs with Ohio Right to Life. Mary, welcome. I know it's called the 2363 Act in reference to the number of abortions daily in the United States. Mary, how likely is House Bill 480 to pass?
So I think that's a question that the legislature will have to answer. It was just recently introduced on November 2nd, so it has yet to be referred to a committee, and it has yet to have any committee hearings.
How closely, Mary, does this bill resemble the Texas law, which we should mention the Supreme Court is now considering?
Exactly. So this law, House Bill 480, which was introduced by Representatives Jena Powell and Thomas Hall, they took language from the Arkansas Unborn Child Protection Act, which passed earlier this year, and then they also used the same mechanism that is used in the Texas heartbeat law. So it's basically a life at conception bill meets the Texas heartbeat law.
All right, so kind of a conglomeration of some different legislation that's out there. Justices during the oral arguments seem to voice concern with the enforcement component of the Texas law. I know we're kind of jumping out ahead of ourselves here, but Mary, how do you expect the Supreme Court to rule in that case? And do you think Ohio Republicans would amend this proposed legislation based on that court ruling?
Exactly. So there are questions that linger in the background because the Supreme Court has not made a final ruling regarding those two lawsuits that came out of the Texas with the Texas heartbeat law. So those are questions that have yet to be answered. I do believe that the bill will be amended should the Supreme Court rule that private right of action is not a method that can be used to enforce abortion laws. I would also like to add that at the same time, Ohio Right to Life, we are lobbying for the Human Life Protection Act, Senate Bill 123, which also works within the confines of court rulings and federal abortion jurisprudence, so that when the Supreme Court rules that abortion can be regulated by the state, our bill will also go into effect. So I just wanted to clarify that there are two abortion bans in Ohio at the moment. There's House Bill 480, which is more of the Texas-style private right of action, life at conception. Then there's also Senate Bill 123, the Human Life Protection Act, which is commonly called a trigger ban.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Mary. The pro-life movement, as you know, aims to protect and honor the dignity of all life, all human life, and aims to end abortion. When you look at this legislation, does something like this, blocking any and all access to abortion, hurt the goal of winning over hearts and minds?
Well, I think here in Ohio, we are focused on helping families. We're focused on helping women in crisis pregnancies to carry those children to term. Here within the state of Ohio, our government gives over $6 million in the budget to help with pregnancy centers. And then pregnancy centers themselves, without any taxpayer dollars, provide about $15 million in aid in our state alone. So here we're saying that abortion is not healthcare. Abortion is not the answer, and we are here to help women and families so that they can raise these children and have good options when in crisis.
All right, Mary Parker with Ohio Right to Life, thank you so much. It's great to have you tonight.
All right, thank you so much.
And when we come back, inspired by God, meet the father and son duo redefining peace, not in words, but with paint.
Welcome back. Two Virginia artists hope their creations, now on display at Washington's Museum of the Bible, will inspire peace.
The two have a special connection and say they are painting apprentices of the Most High God. Eric Phillips has their story.
Philippians 4:6 speaks of peace that passes all understanding. Peace that is so desperately needed in times such as these. A father-son duo, visual artists from Richmond, Virginia, put together a dissertation of peace exhibit on display here at the Museum of the Bible. Works that they say were inspired by God to point toward peace. Unrest is not hard to find, not domestically, not internationally. And peace seems to be so elusive.
If we can go into the highways and hedges and compel men and women to come to Him. That's the key to peace. That's why we use our artwork as a way to draw them to Him.
Jerome Jones and his son Jeremiah are both thankful to have their work on display at the Museum of the Bible, a dissertation on peace, not in words, but paint.
We're designing and redefining the game.
A collection of 27 paintings between the two of them, some dating back 30 years or more. They call it their pop art.
Prince of Peace, P-O-P, that's our pop art. These prints are a reflection of the Prince of Peace and the King of Peace, and that's our way of spreading the word. Right.
So it's almost like we're painting social issues from a spiritual perspective, telling history from a spiritual perspective.
One of the pieces in our show is called Let's Pray, and it's a little girl and a little boy at the table in the living room, and you see the neighborhood in the background. And prayer is the key to peace. And so when we give the Heavenly Father the highest praise, praise is another key to peace.
The two see art as their ministry.
We see ourselves as apprentices to the Most High.
But men's hearts have grown cold because they're not following the Master.
We don't know what her situation is, but we understand that she got through it from her meditation.
Each shape, color, and character full of symbolism. Some of the art also includes poetry written by Jeremiah. For these artists, peace is spelled G-O-D.
He's the correction to the world's depression. He's the calm after every election. He is the degree who doctors our philosophy. He is the serenity after accepting prophecy. He is the master. Peace.
In Washington, Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Really neat to see a father and son do that together to talk about our Heavenly Father. Well, coming up, a ban on a beloved Christmas tradition that thrills young kids, one judge's comedic take that might give some parents just the excuse they were looking for.
Finally tonight, no more Elf on the Shelf in the state of Georgia. The children's Christmas tradition banned by a judge there.
This is not a story about a Grinch, though. It's all in good fun. Cobb County Judge Rob Leonard posting the tongue-in-cheek order on Twitter, fighting what he calls the tyranny of the elves. The judge says the elves are distracting and cause emotional distress to children when they wake up and see they haven't moved. And for parents, you know it's a distress for you as well. The judge did make an exception, though, for fans of Santa's little helpers, saying, if you love your elf, you can keep your elf. No contempts.
You know, I think a lot of children might disagree with that.
I would have to agree. You know, I never did Elf on the Shelf when I was a kid.
Did you? I mean, if it involves presents.
Well, then I missed out. Thanks for watching.
Have a great night.